Welcome to another Figure Week, Hard Surface Week, Organic Week.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmed Al-Douri. I'm a concept artist and former instructor at Art Center College of Design, Brainstorm, CCS, CGMA, and various other places. And I would like to introduce to you this digital painting course that I've created. But before we get into anything, I just want to thank you for the support you've all given me this whole time. And with the support of so many of you, I've been able to put together everything I know about painting into this digital painting course. You want to become a pro illustrator, concept artist, or even just a hobbyist, but you don't have a clear map to get there. And that's where I come in. I spent the last 6 months compiling everything I know from my 20 years of art practice, and I've turned it all into a map. Starting with foundations such as rendering shapes, color theory, painting basic subjects, understanding brushwork, brush economy, all that fun stuff, deconstructing the skull, drawing it from every angle, all the way to master studies, stylized painting, and you'll find yourself at the end of the course doing a concept art project based on everything that we learn in the first 14 lessons. So how does it work? Well, you sign up, you watch the lectures, do the assignments, post them to the community page if you want, and treat it as a self-study, except for those of you who have signed up for the weekly meeting, where I personally critique your work in a virtual classroom setting. I believe learning by repetition is super important. That's what I've sort of presented a lot in this course, and the assignments are tailored for that, as adapted from my time teaching at Art Center. And each of these lessons have step-by-step explanations in real time. If you've ever seen my videos, you know exactly how I teach. And this course is intended to be a substitute for a college level course, but you don't have to pay the $4,000 or $5,000 per class, racking up maybe $200K in debt. With my custom design course, you'd be paying a fraction of that. And of course, I also have payment plan options if you don't want to pay for the whole thing at once. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see you soon.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. Thank you for joining me once again. I hope, as always, wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and being creative. And I hope these podcasts, these episodes are going some way towards helping with that calmness, with that creativeness, and inspiration also. Like most episodes, I always try to source the best people I can for these talks. And you know, I've had feedback in the Discord recently. If you guys aren't part of that, make sure you check down below in the description. You can join our community of over 200 artists at the moment, where we do feedback sessions and we're starting to do challenges. But yeah, there is also a part where you can suggest guests. And one of the most requested so far in the last 6 months has been the person I have on just now. So yes, I am listening to you guys, definitely, and wanting to get the best for you. So yeah, today we're talking to an illustrator, concept designer, and all-round just fucking awesome person, Mr. Steven Zapata. Hey Steven, how are you doing?
Hey Gordon, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. You're welcome. So yeah, you've been kind of blown up in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years. I know obviously you've had a career in concept design and illustration for a long time, but I think social-wise, you know, you've definitely been active and streaming, you know, putting out content, collaborating with other people. I think the first time I properly not knew of you, but really saw you socially was when you had done a podcast with Modern Day James Douglas, in New York. And you're obviously an NY yourself, and yeah, that was the first time I really got to sit down and listen to you kind of chatter away. It was you, Ahmed, and James, and yeah, you were having a good old rant. But yeah, so I mean, what kind of spurred the last couple of years and really getting in the public eye? I mean, first of all, for people who don't know you, do you want to do just a quick intro of who you are, what you do?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I've been in concept design, entertainment design in general. I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up here. I went to Los Angeles to go to Art Center College of Design after high school. So I started over there when I was 19. So that's back in 2009. And did my 4 years over there. Stayed in LA for a total of, I think it's 9 years. I want to say I stayed in LA, doing a bunch of stuff out there, especially a longer stint in studio, three-ish, a little bit more than 3 years, working in theme parks out there in LA. Moved back to New York, and started doing freelance when I was in New York, including all sorts of stuff: advertising, print, tabletop games. During that time, I did a long stint on Elder Scrolls Online for over a year, doing concept with them.
Nice.
So yeah, that's sort of been the trajectory or that's like the really bottled version of me.
Condensed, yeah.
But the social stuff really started coming up. I'd say, I really started getting interested in that right after Elder Scrolls, right after I got off Elder Scrolls. So that would have been 2019-ish, if I remember correct. And that came from, at that point, I had sort of tried a lot of the stuff that I had been interested in when I went into the industries. So, I'd hit a lot of milestones. I'd found a way to make my living off of art. I'd done both freelance and studio life. And I had tried a bunch of niches, right? So I had done short and long stints on all sorts of stuff. And I had done a little bit of video game work very early on, like my first jobs ever. Like my first freelance thing was some freelance for a Russian MMO called All Odds, which I'm not sure. I think that's how you pronounce it. All Odds RPG, something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if that's still running or if they're still around, but
right.
I had done so for them, I had done some game work early on, but then I did like everything else. And then Elder Scrolls was like my return to games, which was really, when I went into the industries, that's really what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to be a games artist. But so after I got off, I was like, man, I've tried a bit of everything. And when I like looked at myself, honestly, I was like, I'm a bit dissatisfied for complicated reasons, right? As it goes with art, there's a lot going on with us. Yep. And I found that I wanted more human connection, but also artistic connection, and a space to talk about the stuff that we often feel like isn't on the table in the entertainment design world and the design world in general.
Okay.
So I launched a YouTube channel at that point, not to show tutorials or things like that, but to basically just have like the kinds of conversations I would have with my friends behind closed doors, and talk about all of the complicated stuff that comes up in art, like feeling confused, feeling dissatisfied, feeling jealous, envious, not understanding yourself, being angry at yourself, not being able to spend as much time as you want on the thing that you love the most, things like that. And that was a reaction to everything that I'd gone through. And I'm sort of still living the expansion out from that, but that's where that all came from.
Yeah, it's for me, I think, again, like we were talking about this before we started recording, about 6 years podcasting now, it feels like I've had this where most artists I know are almost low-level philosophers, right? They have this understanding of life and things in it that most people don't. I remember I was watching an episode of Sabrina when they relaunched it, the Netflix series. There's a part where they're at a funeral and they're talking about the people. I think it's Zelda. She says one of the things where she's like, "Do people ever really understand the complexity and shortness of life?" And then the guy standing next to him says, "Maybe the artist." And it's one thing that stuck with me for a long time, is that I think art sees life in different terms, and I think when you become an artist and then you clash into that industry part of it, that's the thing you're always fighting with, right? Is the doing it for money, the business end of it, being a sellout, and I think a lot of guys now we both know Ahmed very well, and I think he definitely has become disillusioned with the whole industry, like yourself, and the fact that he's sold his soul for so many years doing stuff, and has spent so many years now trying to re-find himself. Is that kind of something you've done when you moved back to New York?
Yeah. I mean, well, when I first moved back to New York, so this would have been 2016. When I first moved back to New York, my first priority was at that point I'd never been able to support myself off freelance. So
Mm-hmm.
when I first moved to New York, and this is a phase a lot of us go through, I was like, all right, next step. Let's see if I can do it just freelance, just not being anybody's permanent direct employee. So
Mm-hmm.
that was really where I put my energies in the beginning when I moved to New York.
Mm-hmm.
But quickly it became more about that, of figuring
Mm-hmm.
myself out. I was also, well, what you said about artists being low level philosophers, it's like, I think that our lifestyle inclines us to that almost automatically, right?
Yeah.
Because we, by nature of our job, we're often alone,
Mm-hmm.
solitary. Even if
Mm-hmm.
we work at a studio, once someone gives you the assignment, you've got to sit there for 8 hours making it.
Yeah.
And what that amounts to practically for a lot of us is that you're sitting there with your own thoughts for 8 hours.
Mm.
Unless you fill your head with audiobooks, podcasts, things like that. But
Yeah.
even if you do that, you're still consuming more books, more podcasts, more media than the average
About
person.
life, about experiences. Yeah.
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 So it's almost, from my experience with my peers and my friends, it's almost impossible to not have that affect you just because of the practical makings of the lifestyle.
Yeah.
And yeah, you wind up, well, depending on how you measure it, you're either overthinking it or thinking deeply
Yeah.
about what's going on with you, what you're going through, where you want to go. That's why almost all artists seem to go through some phase where they're very caught up with like self-help or fitness or psychology. We almost all go through a phase where we're handling our health, we're handling our mental health, we're reading all these books, finding all the best people for that stuff. Yeah, I think it's just because we have more time than most people to consume
Yeah.
that stuff. I remember when I worked back in studio in LA, the artist alley, we were the only people who, it was totally cultural norm in the office that we just had headphones on and had YouTube wide open on a 30-inch monitor right next to our heads all day, every day. Sorry, my chair clicked. I hope that didn't blow out the
That's
audio.
fine. It's fine.
But that no one else could do that. You
Yeah.
couldn't just advertise to the whole office that you were listening to YouTube all day and just having
Yeah.
the video playing. But in
Yeah.
Artist Alley, it was totally a norm. Nobody would bother you. They were just like, well, they need to make the art. Don't interrupt them while they make the art, and it helps them get in the zone or flow. So
Yeah.
the norms are just a bit different for us, I think,
Yeah.
a lot of the times. And yeah, it just creates a huge space to retrospect and to look at your life.
Yeah.
And hopefully produce useful and good philosophies, though not every time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also why so many people I know struggle with mental health in general in this industry. And I mean, one part of it is just the industry in general, just throwing you in like a meat grinder and hoping you come out the other end still alive. But the other part is that, you're so creative for so long. I remember talking about, I think it was Da Vinci at the time, who talked about, like he was maybe only actively painting for maybe an hour or two a day, like a lot of the other times he was writing, he was journaling, he was researching. But we have this output now that is like, if you go to a studio job, for instance, you work 5 days a week, you're going to have to be active 40, 50 hours a week doing stuff. I mean, maybe paint 30 hours of that, but still that every week, every month, every year, like I don't think we would have really built to be that creative for such a prolonged time.
No, I don't.
And it really starts to wear on you, because at one point the engine just runs out and you're like, I've nothing left. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was times in studio where I'm not the coolest guy. So if this sounds like a really uncool thing to do, I admit to it. I'm really not the coolest guy. But they, after a certain point, they trusted me, right? So they
Mhm.
gave me a bit of a
Those
leash. They gave
fools.
me a bit of slack. I could sort of do stuff. So
Yeah.
there was a long period there where, because I believe what you just said, I was
Mhm.
like, well, I'm not going to. I'm sure you've had this experience before. I don't know if
Mhm.
in an art job or something, but
Right.
my least favorite thing is pretending to be busy. It makes me insane. And I've
Mm.
had art jobs, the a problem what I'm thinking of is at an advertising studio, but
Mhm.
where I did my task in an hour, but I need to be there all day. So then I'm just like sitting there looking at my computer, literally just turning layers on and off in Photoshop
All right.
so that it looks like I'm working. And that to me that's when I'm the least happy in my life. I feel
Right.
like leaping out of my skin when I do that. That's not
Yeah.
fun for me.
Yeah, of course.
I enjoy creating.
Mhm.
I enjoy being productive.
Yeah.
So back at this old studio,
Mhm.
we were having times like that. And because I had some leash, I was like, I'm not going to put up with this. So I
Mhm.
would purposefully just screw off for the whole first half of the day. I would
Mhm.
go, I wouldn't not show up to work,
Mhm.
but I would I convinced the company to give me a VR headset. So I would go for the first 4 hours of the day. I would go up to this black box that they had
Mhm.
upstairs on the second floor, and I would just paint in VR for 4 hours, totally not doing my job. And then I would let it all compress. And then for the last 3 to 4 hours of the day, I'd come back down to my desk and I'd do everything that I needed to do in 8 hours in a 4 hour
Mhm.
rush.
Right.
Like I said, that doesn't sound cool. I'm not the coolest guy,
No, no,
but
no. But yeah, I get it. Yeah. I think
it's a
that's why so
reaction to that. It's a
yeah.
reaction to the fact that you can't be at your max for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's an unsustainable thing, and it's unrealistic to expect from people.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I noticed people talking about in the industry right now that's really gaining traction is the 4-day work week, because people are starting to realize that 5 days, we're working from the Ford Motors group, back in the day when, Ford had this 5-day work week, 9 to 5, and then that's how schools were then formed, because then they were based off that and kids would go to school for 9 to 5. And so, because they were training factory workers, that was the whole point of it. So, like, now that we are in an industry where you're being creative, it's like, yeah, like, why do we need to be there Monday to Friday? Why can't we have a 3-day work week or a 4-day work week, sorry, and a 3-day weekend? It makes more sense, because then those are the days, especially at the weekend when you're off, where you gain inspiration. You go hiking, you spend time with friends, you go and experience life, you read a book, you fill your head with new information. That's almost like a push and pull relationship your entire life, is that you have to balance the media you consume versus the media you create. And I think the studios are just, archaic like that in a sense. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, I mean, screw it. For me, it's like 3-day work week, 2-day work week. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I'm pretty far out there. Like I'm as
yeah.
bohemian as it gets on this stuff.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I don't these arbitrary systems that we all happen to have woken up and found ourselves in, like,
Yeah.
they're nice and all, and they definitely do have benefits, but
Mhm.
I'm not saying get rid of all of them, right? I'm not
No,
an
of course.
anarchist. I'm not an
Yeah.
anarchist, but I don't see any reason to not. I don't see any reason to accept them without scrutiny. I think
Yeah.
they should all be scrutinized, and almost to a person,
Mhm.
everyone who's in them and doing the work at the
Mhm.
vanguard, right?
Mhm.
They feel dissatisfied about the
Mhm.
systems. They feel hurt by them. And the only people who feel really good about the systems are the people who really engage with them the least. The
Yeah.
power brokers, the people who run everything, the rent
Mhm.
seekers, they're the
Yeah.
ones who like all of this stuff.
Mhm.
And the people who are actually doing the work tend not to.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, as far as I would say, like, reassess everything. one
Yeah.
day work week, 2-day work week,
Mhm.
totally just like flexible schedule.
Yeah.
I'm living that now, at the
Mhm.
point that I'm in at my life right
Mhm.
now. I have moved away from
Mhm.
the industries.
Mhm.
I'm doing mostly teaching now,
Mhm.
which I prefer
Yeah,
greatly, right? Again, like I said, because I came to this discovery that I really needed more human and artistic connection.
of
And I
course.
find that the teaching is really the best gateway I have found to
Oh
that.
yeah, 100%.
But the other thing about that is that I'm really on my own time now.
Mm-hmm.
I make my own schedule. I only do the things that I want to do.
Yep.
I have removed a lot of bad incentives from my life. There's more work to be done there, but
Mm-hmm.
I really relish every little bad incentive that I've been able to take off of the board. And I mean, I vastly prefer this life.
Yeah.
It's amazing how once you've removed the like driving pressure of
Mm-hmm.
the systems, the fact that I'm choosing everything that I'm doing and that I do feel free to like, I could just take today off just on a lark, really,
Yeah.
right? Like whenever I want. Um, because I feel that's true in my guts,
Mm-hmm.
it makes me feel so relaxed that I can just do a shit ton of work, it turns out,
Yeah.
which is not something to go for, I would say. It's like, it's
No,
not,
no.
yeah, you don't do that to like just take on more work, but I do find it almost comical that it's like, I can do a lot of work, be very productive, be
Mm-hmm.
very creative, but also like I also have the energy to be better about having a social life,
Yep.
to indulge other interests, to
Yep.
do even my chores, like do the dishes and take care of my dog and do all of these other things. Like I
Take
just
care of
feel
you
like,
as well and your health. I mean,
yeah, it's
yeah.
great. It's
Yeah.
great. It's just it feels much more sustainable to
Mm-hmm.
me. It feels much more like the solid grounds for a life that I can, yeah, feel is sustainable day
Yeah.
to day instead of feeling
100%.
like I'm on some sort of treadmill or something like that.
Yeah, it was always talk about this. An interesting kind of haiku moment I had when again James Douglas, Modern James. I remember when I initially started talking to him about what he was doing, and the two things that stuck in my head about James I think is great about him is the one was when I asked him what he was kind of aiming for, I was like, "Oh, do you want to work in this studio or this studio?" It was like, "I don't know, man. I kind of want to just do my own thing. I want to work on my own stuff and I want to do my own projects." And I was thinking, how is that? How is that a goal? How is that sustainable? But me being younger, naive, thinking like, if you're not working for Blizzard or Riot, like what are you doing with your life?
Right.
But also once I said to him, why do you draw the things you draw? He says, I just think back to you like 15-year-old me, man, and think what would make him happy, and then that's just what I aim for. And it's like if we could all be that pure, the industry I think would be so much better. And it's hard to be like that because the industry does get in your head that, like I say, is like, oh, you need to work it right. You need to work it, but you need to go to art center. If you don't go to art center, you're not even going to make it in the industry. Never mind, like getting a studio or Nomon or whatever.
Mhm.
And I think now online schools with the stuff you're doing, with the stuff Ahmed's doing, that's shifting. That whole industry, that brick and mortar sense is going away. The fact that you've got to be in studios now, especially with COVID and now remote working, it feels like almost revolution, not in just like our industry, but the world. That how it's just shifting paradigms. I don't know for better or worse, but
Right.
but like, how do you feel about the way systems are now built in with, especially students, right? Because you deal with students all day. So, are half of them all like, I want to work at Blizzard, I want to work at Riot, I want to work in LA. Have you got to disillusion them with that, or are you happy to encourage it?
No, well, I certainly try not to disillusion, right? No
Mm-hmm.
matter how disillusioned I am, right? Like I think there's a sort of like, I don't feel ashamed of my cynicism, right? It's
Right.
like I personally feel, and people can judge me about this or whatever, but I
Mm,
personally feel I've earned my cynicism, right?
of
Like
course.
I've been there. I did it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, I have life experience to base my cynicism. And by cynicism, I just mean my opinion that like it's not for me and it's not all it's cracked up to be. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't, I don't worry about, I feel secure in how I feel about stuff. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not interested in projecting that cynicism on a young person or a
Right.
student, right?
Mm-hmm.
I totally see how those things can be separate, right? Because every
Yeah.
artist is different. But that said, what I do and what I have found is that I try to, with a student, I try to find out what type of artist they are,
Mm-hmm.
because these days there's a few different like archetypes that people are sort of funneling into. So
Mm-hmm.
the big ones for me, when it comes to anyone who wants anything to do with entertainment, concept
Mm-hmm.
art, video games, whatever,
Yeah.
there's to me there's two types. So the first one is the person who really just wants to draw and paint. That's
Mm-hmm.
actually all they care about. They just want to get really good at drawing. And it just so happens that this job and this industry are the only bucket for that they have found in culture, right? Maybe
Right.
they know about fine art, but for their temperament or something, fine art seems crazy or something like that. Or they've talked to their parents about it, and the idea of an industry, a commercial industry, is much more palatable to their parents than the fine art industry is. So
Right.
either way, they what they have at their core is just they want to draw and paint, and this is the bucket they've found. If I can get this job, I get to draw and paint for the rest of my life.
Yep.
There's that kind of student, and then there's the other one who is product focused. It's less that they love drawing and painting. They must have some inclination towards art making, right? But
Right.
they would what they really love is video games or movies or something
Right.
like that,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
you can almost figure out who you are, where, like, for me, I don't feel confused. If you if you summoned a genie and the genie was like, Steven, you get to pick.
Mhm.
You can either never draw again or never play a video game again. I wouldn't have to think. I'd be like, I'll never
Right.
play a video game again.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without a doubt. It wouldn't even hurt my feelings, right?
Right.
Like, it wouldn't really be a big deal. And I like games. I like games a lot, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just know in my heart, like, I'll just do a different hobby. Like, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and then, but a lot of other people are going to
Mhm.
go, shit,
Yeah.
and a lot
Yeah.
of people are going to say, take the drawing. Like, I don't know if I could do something with it. It hurts most of the time. I love games,
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
you can almost run that test with yourself
Mhm.
to find out, maybe what, it's a spectrum, but you can kind
Yeah.
of find out what side you land on. So
Mhm.
once you have a feeling of that, I think
Mhm.
that can actually guide a lot of your choices,
Yeah.
because for the genre slash product focused artist, the one who
Mhm.
really loves video games,
Right.
for them, I would say you should basically be willing to do anything to work on a video game, right?
100%.
Yeah, you should
This
basically.
is verbatim what I've just told a student the other night. Exactly the
Yeah.
same thing. Yeah. 100%. Yep. Yep.
So for them, I really believe that, right? If
Yeah.
they're pretty far on that spectrum, if they would tell the genie, get rid of drawing, give me the video games forever,
Yep.
I really would tell them, do whatever it takes, change week to week,
Yep.
just go, get in with people from the studios, go for your
Yep.
favorite studio, ape their style, use whatever tool necessary, because for you,
Mhm.
it's just not that much about the process of making the thing, right?
That's the end result. Yeah.
Yeah, what you want is you want to be associated with Blizzard, with Riot, or something
Yep.
like that, right? And
Yep.
as bohemian as I am, people are different. I
Yeah.
know that people get satisfaction from different things. And if
Mhm.
that's the satisfaction that is on the table for a human being, I want them to
Mhm.
have it. I want
Of
them
course.
to have it
Yeah.
and to be happy
Yeah.
about it. On the other hand, a student who finds that process really is the answer, right?
Mhm.
Again, it takes different shapes depending on who you are, but for me,
Mhm.
I find, like, it it's very important to me that the thing I do be fun to do moment to
Mhm.
moment, right?
Yep.
Like, it's got to feel good for me,
Yeah.
right? And I don't get a lot of satisfaction from the final product. And
Yep.
I get almost no satisfaction from being on a big project, right? Like,
Right.
there can be some initial excitement there. It can color the lead up, like doing the work, like, oh, well, at least it's for this company. But
Mhm.
then once the product's out, often I forget I did it. Like, I still encounter things out in the world, and I'm like, oh shit, I worked on that. Like, I forgot that I worked on that until I see it out
Yeah.
in life. And I just don't, it's in one ear and it's out the other, right? For
Yeah.
me, I'm a much more process focused artist.
Of course.
For those students, people who are anything like me,
Mhm.
I would not give the same advice I would give to the other type of student.
Yeah. Of
I
course.
would tell them, and I think this might be the harder path to go down, but
Mhm.
you need to carefully prune things out of your life, mainly the
Mhm.
bad incentives
Mhm.
that will pull you away from the things you feel you need for your artistic spirit or the satisfaction that you need to get out of art. And that's a hard thing to do because, these systems like to pull us the other way because they stand to gain more from the product than they do from how you feel while you make the product. That's almost irrelevant to anybody who's selling the final thing. So the energy is always in the current system. The energy is always going to flow in one direction over the other.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, that whole thing you just said is I think crucial for students to figure out. I mean, I'm definitely the product person. Like, I just want to be part of. I mean, it's not even just a thing where I'm like, oh, I want to work for Blizzard because I want to be famous. It's like, I just want to be part of something bigger than me.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be standing behind a team that does incredible things and like just say that I was part of it. You know, it was funny when somebody done this the other day, and it was actually crazy when I thought about it because we were talking about Overwatch, right? And how today, as we're recording, Overwatch 2 is launching and the whole transition's taking part. And he was always, you know, I had this conversation about art and being in projects and teams and stuff like that. And he was like, you know, when you play first-person shooters? I was like, yeah. He's like, do you play mostly damage roles, tanks? Like, what do you usually main? I'm like, I don't know if this is relevant, but I usually main supports. And he was like, all right, okay, cool. So you want to heal, you want to buff, you want to get behind your team and make them better? Yeah. That speaks volumes about you, Gordon. I was like, oh, shit. And I never thought about that. But like, yeah, like you subconsciously throughout your life, even in video games, pick these roles and RPGs and anything you do that, like, you know, do you inherently play the bad guy, the good guy? Do you go wizard? Do you go, you know, like all these things are subconsciously parts of you that are feeding into other things. And the fact that in almost every first person shooter I play, I want to buff and heal and help the team push forward just spoke volumes about my intro into the industry and where I want to be. I just want to be part of a team, helping them and pushing them and elevating them. And, you know, I mean, I don't know what a guy like you would play, but you know what I mean? But it's like, it's interesting to think about your roles. Yeah.
If Bloodborne is any indicator, an invader. I ruin people's day. That's what I do.
Just appear with a pistol and a hatchet or a butcher cleaver and like, let's do this thing.
That's my role. Yeah, I'm that guy. Yeah. Cut things up.
Yeah,
man, but I mean, he really got right at the heart of you with that one. No, I was just saying that's a great story. That's great.
Yeah. And it's funny to think about it now when you look back and think, how was that even relevant? But then you think back and you're like, oh shit, yeah, that does make sense. And yeah, the product, people do just want to be in the games industry, in the movie industry. You know, it's something maybe because they've consumed the media growing up, you know, and for me, games definitely, especially because I'm in Scotland, you know, and between here and Ireland, we sold the most PlayStation 1s back in the day because when you're on an island, escapism is worth its weight in gold. So, you know, playing games initially, you know, have helped me develop social skills, problem solving skills, you know, critical thinking, you know, socializing with people. I mean, they've done so much good in my life. And it's got to a point now where I'm trying to enter an industry that is part of that, but it's hard because also you've got to sacrifice certain things. And it's like you said with the Genie, you know, giving up the games, giving up the drawing. If you want to be a good concept designer, artist, illustrator, you know, you kind of have to give up with that part of your life because it's like you said, it's a distraction from, you know, what you're meant to be doing. And there's so much discipline that has to go into that art form specifically. I mean, 3D and other disciplines have, you know, a huge barrier entry and they're not any easier than any other. But like, I think with drawing, there's this fundamental skill that so much relies on your core skills. You can't fake that as much. I mean, with 3D artists, you know, sometimes the program can do things that, you know, you don't have to do because it's figuring it out for you, algorithms, things in the background, light and perspective. But with 2D, that's all on you. Like if you make a line out of whack or like the colors off, you know, you can't fake that in a program because it's physically you that's doing it. And that's the harder sell for students, is that you really have to be disciplined to want to do that particular art form.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but the other thing is that the industries change constantly and very rapidly. Like, I had someone message me the other day, sending me his portfolio. And usually when someone does that, what I need first and foremost is I need you to pick a goal. Like almost any portfolio without a reason it exists, right? A particular studio, particular industry is out of context. They're useless, basically, right? So I got the goal from him, and he sent me his portfolio, which had a lot of hard work in it, right? But he
Right.
said, I think I want to work for Ubisoft. Like, I want to work for a place that's like Ubisoft.
Mhm.
And his portfolio was really heavy on drawing and painting, right? And he had gained good skills in drawing and
Mhm.
painting, right? It wasn't like top tier, but it was
Mhm.
definitely above average, right? And,
Right.
and and for a lot of drawing stuff, it could be entry level.
Right.
But based on the goal, I had to tell him, and it breaks my heart as the kind of person I am, like
Mm.
I'm known for my traditional drawings mostly at this point.
Yeah.
Um, it breaks my heart to have to say it, but I told him and it's my personal opinion.
Mhm.
Anyone who works at Ubisoft may think I'm wrong, and you should talk to them. But I
Yeah.
told him, like, because I went and researched, I went and looked, like, all right, let's look at Ubisoft's concept art. I
Yeah.
was like, I I think a portfolio this heavy in drawing and painting will hurt you getting a job
Mm.
at Ubisoft, because
Right.
if and there's deception in the art industries, that's a whole other can of worms. But if we look at the product they put out there,
Right.
it's all using photos, efficiently
Yeah.
using photography and doing
Yep.
photo
Yep.
bashing.
Yep.
So even though it can be a flex to show that
Mhm.
you can actually draw, if the
Mhm.
portfolio is dominated by that and it
Mhm.
goes to the wrong studio, in this case Ubisoft, it's
Yep.
not going to be a good look. It's instead
Mm.
going to advertise that it's likely that you're going to waste time trying to draw things when you
Right.
should just be putting a photo in
Yep.
there.
Yep.
So the so like I was saying, the industries change constantly. So
Yeah.
students sometimes come to me thinking that I'm going to be like hook, line, and sinker to say drawing is everything, because that's all I put out there in public, right?
Of course.
Whether it's digital, whether it's drawing on paper, I don't use any
Mhm.
photos. I just draw from my head raw, right? So
Yeah.
they think I'm going to be hook, line, and sinker on that. But
Mhm.
sometimes they're surprised when I'm like, only if that's relevant to you. Like, I
Yeah.
don't begin from that assumption. And if they're
Yep.
coming at me with an industry goal, it's like,
Mhm.
prove it to me. That's my usual stance. I'm like, prove to me that for that goal, you need to draw well, because that's
Yep.
actually not my starting point. There's plenty
Mhm.
of positions where we can separate things like design knowledge and design
Mhm.
understanding, but just like to draw well by hand is not
Mhm.
necessarily needed for
Yeah.
every kind of art thing, and
Agreed.
and
Yep.
if it is, it might only be up to a certain level. You don't need to
Yeah.
draw like Carl Kapinski for every damn job,
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you're doing book covers or stuff for Warhammer, or like you want to go and get those illustrations. I mean, like people who like have the goal, I want to work for Magic the Gathering, right? Cool. You need to be a savant at like drawing and painting. Like that's just a given. Hearthstone, any card game where there's illustrations, book covers, magazines. But concept design in its own, like you say, can involve stuff like photo bashing, photo
Mhm.
textures, 3D with Blender now, of course. Or there's some people who don't even draw; they just make stuff in 3D and take screenshots, and that is the end result. But then, if that's what the director wants, what the art director wants, sure. Then what the why are you even wasting your time drawing? That's why I think a goal is so important. And I think we were having this conversation the other day. So myself and Antonio Staparts, who runs Artwad in in Europe, he was talking about how back in the day when studios hired a ton of photo bashers, a lot of the art that was put out was generic. It was bland, and I think Ubisoft. We even talked about this from a gamer's perspective, that they have a formula now where they put out similar things. I mean, obviously the teams work incredibly hard on a lot of this stuff, and stuff like Assassin's Creed Valhalla was incredible, and the amount of history and lore that goes into it. But then the painting style, yeah, that is very similar. And I think what people are now seeking is the traditional mediums, is stylizing stuff, is Riot and Blizzard employ a lot of kind of unique artists because they have a very unique spin, but they are now in a position where they built that skill up over years, and now they're needed. And I think, as we were talking about earlier with AI art, there might even be a thing now where that becomes so generic that people will start to seek out the masters, people who really can put out stylized work or something that's different. It's a hard industry, because from when I started back in 2012, when I left my job as an engineer to go back to university, ArtStation wasn't even a thing. There was no online learning whatsoever. No one was there, but it was the old DVD system and stuff like that. And the first stuff I learned on how to draw heads and stuff like that, it was David Finch. It was how to draw heads for comics and stuff, dynamic
Mhm.
heads. So even since I've left and the 8 years I've done it, like the industry has shifted so much because even concept design at a point wasn't even a job. So, it feels like we're not even settled on industry jobs and there's so many new things that are starting and maybe AI artists will be a thing. It will be a job at one point that people do. Who knows? But I know you've experienced it on your streams when you've talked about AI art. You've said about people are saying, it's not really good stuff anyway. And you've kind of said, I wish I could agree with that because I think the stuff is actually quite good. How do you feel? This is a big conversation piece, but AI art in general for what you do, like, are you feeling threatened? Do you see it having a use? Like, where do you sit on the fence?
Okay, so I think this is like the most interesting thing that has happened to us in a very long time. So I've
Since like Photoshop and 3D textures and stuff like that, it's just like,
as long as
right,
I've been around. I mean,
right.
so I knew I wanted to go into entertainment and I started looking at video games, movies, the concept art industry when I was around 16 years old. So that
Oh,
means that
wow.
I've had my eye on it for about 16 years now because I'm 32 now.
Right.
So people have been around way longer than that, sure, but
Yeah.
16 years is not nothing, right? So
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of things come and go.
hmm
Um, by my estimation,
hmm
nothing has ever reached this level of interest, confusion, strangeness, novelty, everything. So I think it's a
Yeah.
huge conversation with an immense amount of nuance, and it's a very complicated thing to try to figure out.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, I hardly know where to begin. I hope you don't mind if I just kind of like run for a
No, no,
second.
no. Just you do your thing. I'll just sit and listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so first off, and as we've alluded to before, this is a pretty contentious subject at this
hmm
point, which makes sense because we're all so confused, right? And
Yep.
a lot of people's livelihoods and things like that are tied up with it.
hmm
Um, but to start off with, just to reference what you asked me, like, do I feel threatened? Right.
hmm
So I personally do not feel threatened,
Okay.
but that's interesting. That's interesting on its own, I think, because
Okay.
okay, I don't feel threatened because I started moving away from the industries back in 2018, like I said,
Right. Yeah.
2018ish, right? Now, mind you, I already thought it was a good idea to move away from the industries in 2018 when I had barely heard of AI, right? Like I'd heard of like Dream, what was it? Dream by Wumbo, the one that made everything look like dogs. Not Wumbo, Deep Dream, Google's Deep Dream.
Right. Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that had been around. So, we had gotten some very like LSD dog pictures that looked like
Right.
other
Yeah.
environments and things like that. But that was about it. And even then I was
hmm
interested because I've always been a sci-fi fan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um but lesser issues, right? Issues that I had with downward pressure on rates, the rapid change in the market,
hmm
globalization and competition, issues like that, which by comparison are much smaller, I had
hmm
already been like, you know what? I think I need to expand a little bit. And
hmm
I had started already putting my energy into people, into human beings, and
Right.
into making connections with other people rather than staring into the face of this abstraction that is the
Yeah.
industry.
hmm
So, with this coming onto the scene right now,
hmm
I already have a platform of human connection. I already have a career teaching art. That teaching, as far as I can tell, is not absolutely predicated on teaching people how to get into the industries. That's not
hmm
what most people come to me for. Most
Right.
of my students come to me to draw well. That's what they
Right.
want to do. They see the way that I draw and they're like, how the hell do I do that? Right. And
Yeah.
then what they want to do with it is up to them. And I would actually say not even most of my students and my community specifically want an art job. So my teaching is not predicated completely on being an industry funnel, right? It's
Right.
about drawing at its core.
Yeah.
And now, very recently, for the first time, um, financially, I'm making as much money doing that as I did in the industries. So
Right.
So I'm not. What I'm trying to say is my bets are hedged very well at this
Right.
point, right? So
Yeah.
if AI becomes a huge thing, I get to keep teaching people how to draw on paper and making
Of
a good
course.
living off of it.
Yep.
Things are going well with that. So
Yeah.
that's interesting because, like I'm saying, I don't really feel that personally threatened, but
Mhm.
I am way angrier than most people about it. So I think that should say something about the nature of the landscape and things like that. Now, when I
Mhm.
say angry about AI, I want to
Mhm.
explain that
Mhm.
because I'm not angry at any individual person, right? And no artists. Let me say that. Maybe there
Right.
are
Okay.
some people I'm angry at, but no artists. I know how artists are. When something amazing comes along, we're artists because we're interested in what is interesting. We're
Yeah.
interested
Of
in
course.
what is cool and strange and new. Like I totally understand that. So
Yeah.
I am literally not angry at any individual person who uses AIs and is playing with them and everything like that. What
Right.
I'm angry about is the environment around them at the moment. That's what bothers me. Um,
Mhm.
the way that these were produced, the way that they're
Mhm.
being distributed, the way that they are trained off of huge data sets of copyrighted imagery and art that is
Mhm.
made by other people, and they basically refuse to own up to that.
Yep.
Those systems are uh, definitely irksome to me. I shouldn't even couch it with irksome. It's like I just think it's wrong. I think it's
Yeah.
very wrong. Carla. You've had Carla Ortiz on your
Oh my
show.
God. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
She is definitely losing her mind right now over the
yeah. So,
AI.
I would say that I'm in Carla's boat at the
Yeah.
moment, um, and I
Have you heard about the UK law that she was talking about the other day? Have you seen that post?
which one? Say again.
There's a UK law right now that would mean that these AI generation image things could take copyrighted images from anybody, and there's no law against it. In fact, there's a law going in place that they can do that and not be punished.
Yeah, I think that's
That's yeah,
I think that's
bullshit.
patent insanity. I think that
Yeah,
that's crazy, and I think that that should be resisted.
yep.
I personally think the AIs should have been launched as with data sets made of Creative Commons
Hmm.
imagery, public domain imagery, and opt in imagery provided by artists who consented to be
Yeah,
in the training set. I
yeah,
think that it's up to the artists, but I think that they should be open to compensating the artists who
of course.
opted in to
Yeah.
have it trained. And I think there should be opt in and opt out options so that
Hmm.
artists can say the next time you retrain the model, which is, we're getting into the details of how these things work, but
Hmm.
next time you retrain the model, count me out, take me out of
Yeah.
it. It affected my livelihood, it affected such and
Hmm.
such. You don't compensate me enough. I want to be out. Right.
Yeah.
So that's my personal that's what I wish they had been. And
Hmm.
I think that if you had asked any of us, let's say 6 years ago, let's rewind the clock 6 years.
Hmm.
If you had asked, now mind you, back then a lot of people would have said this is actually impossible. AIs can never get that good, right? We learned that they have gotten pretty good. So
Yeah.
let's pretend no one would think it was impossible, right? Let's
Hmm.
pretend everyone you ask would understand it's possible for them to
Hmm.
surprise us with how good they are. And then say, which model do you think is a good idea? The one that I just described, where it's Creative Commons imagery, public domain imagery, opt in, opt out, or
Right.
trawl 5 billion images from the internet,
Hmm.
including people's private data, and
Hmm.
train it on that without telling anybody that you're doing it, and then just release the model into the wild for anyone to do whatever they want with. I
Yeah.
think 99.999% of people would have picked the same model. And then
Yeah.
if you offered the second model, the one we're
Mhm.
living in, everyone would have looked at it and been like, don't fucking do that. Don't
Yeah.
let them do that. I think if you run the mental experiment of going back in time, I think it's
Mm.
hard to imagine the crazy person who would be like, let's do the second model. Let's just completely steal everything on the internet and screw over everybody and things like that. So I think that that argument from time is very compelling. And I think that a lot of what I'm going to describe as a sort of like a momentum or inertia, like just everybody feeling like, well, here it is, and we've been screwed before, so what are we going to do? Like that sort of bovine acquiescence to the matter of fact nature of the timeline is really born of the fact that they surprised us, that they didn't ask, that they weren't vetted, that there was no oversight, that there was really no, they don't care. They don't care. That's the problem. We're all sort of doing the mental gymnastics to justify it just because they already damn did it, right? So I personally am not inclined to just accept that so quickly, right? And I think that the acceptance of it is crucial to them, like with the EU law that you just brought up. Like they are depending on artists being ignorant about this, being uncaring about this, or being accepting of this. They are depending on that so that it will be easy for them to change the laws. The people who have everything to gain from this are, of course, depending on that. They're going to need it. Now, the copyright laws on their own are a hairy thing because they change from place to place, right? Something that's going to be legal in one place is going to be illegal in another, and there's going to be weird overlaps that overlap differently across time as well. You know, things are gonna flex and change. So the litigation side of it is extremely worrying to me because you know, once you bring something into the courtroom, it's chaos, right? I mean, if you have any exposure to legal systems, it's like once you sort of, if you're not naive, right? If you, for example, know anyone who has been to prison, or you know, my father was deported, for example. So I've had some encounters with the legal system. Even if you know anyone who's been through a divorce, you know that once you get into court, it's actually chaos. You never know what's going to happen, and it's the commonplace, mundane experience of human beings that when they step into court, they're like, it's obvious I'm going to win. I did nothing wrong. And then they come out and they're like, holy shit, I'm going to prison. Like the case didn't go my way. That's not actually interesting. That's boring. That happens all the time. So I personally am very worried about the litigative angle because I can easily imagine the organized company, or artists are not organized. I can easily imagine the organized company with bottomless pockets defeating a loose conglomeration of artists in court and putting us in a situation where it's like, it may be legal, but that doesn't mean it's just. There's tons of stuff like that in society. So I'm very dubious about the litigation side of it. I'm very worried about how that could go for us. Lots of things have gone poorly for us on those fronts. And I don't know what it's going to take there, but I do think some amount of teasing these incentive structures and these systems out as a discourse between artists, I think some amount of that is going to be very important, right? Because people just don't have it on their radar as a thing, as an important thing. I've already just from my animalistic screaming so far on my streams about these things, I have already woken up some people who felt neutral about it, and suddenly they're like, oh my god, what is going on? It's like it really snuck up on them. So I do feel the discussion is worth it if it's even cluing in a few people into its gravity. It's not the most comfortable discussion. It sucks that it gets tied up with art, which is very associated with people's feelings of self-worth and identity. But I think it's a super important discussion to have. And I haven't even mentioned the industries yet. I'm just talking about the weird problems around the systems, the way they're making them, the way they're distributing them, and the incentive structures of the companies that are making them. I think all of this stuff is extremely troubling.
It's a deep conversation. There's a lot to go through, and like you said, we could spend a whole hour and a half just talking about AI. I've almost tried to get a panel together, but people are so heated right now. I feel it would explode into just chaos. So I'm trying to avoid it for as long as I can until that at least it's settled enough that people won't start screaming and throwing things at their webcam.
Well, better to throw it at your webcam than at people on stage, at least.
Yeah, of course. The way I initially saw it, and I think this still holds true, but there's a caveat, is that if it's opening the door for other people to get into art, that in my sense is a positive thing. What I don't agree with, is what you don't agree with, is that it's scrolling people's work and stealing, essentially. If it was just a data set based on, like you said, copyright free stuff, where it was just stuff that you could use, Creative Commons, totally fine. Go nuts.
Same.
Like, enjoy yourself. Like, type anything you want, spend 24 hours a day making art. Great. I'm happy for you.
I'd use
But
it.
then,
I'd be like, this
yeah,
is so cool. I'd mess around with it all the time.
I'm the same. I've done stuff as well, but like, yeah, like the whole legality thing, like, I know when people back in the day, and this is going back maybe, I can't remember when it launched, maybe even 2010, 2011, when Spotify launched, and people were like, oh my God, all the music in the world ever, and I get to listen to it whenever I want, and it just streams straight to my computer. And then every artist in the world was like, oh fuck. You know what I mean? Like, they had this whole thing where it's not the same as the AI in a sense of the tool, but like it was a thing where people were having a fight where they wanted to be compensated for their work. And, you know, if they have to stream it, they wanted at least some legality and what they could stream and what they were getting back out of it. The music industry has definitely faced copyright issues for a long time, especially when it comes to stuff like remix and people stealing songs. And I mean, I personally love rap myself, and the Notorious B.I.G. was one of the biggest for, you know, taking other people's music and remixing it and rapping over it. But in most cases, he would obviously pay for the rights to use that music.
Mm-hmm.
But for art, it's a weird thing where people have this view on what we do, especially within the entertainment industry, because they can't discern us between normal people who paint in the street for money and people who work in a massive multi-billion-dollar industry. They're like, you should be getting nothing for your work and time. You know, you're a creative. You should be happy that you're getting to do that. I have a real job.
Yeah.
And it's such a, and then when you start to fight in AI, people are like, why the fuck do you care? I'm like, because, you know, like it's such a, like you say, even I was ignorant to it at the start, where people would say that, like, I think, oh no, it's great, people getting into art, and you know, it's a tool, it'll be like photo bashed in 3D, like, but it'll just become something we use at one point in the process. But the legality thing of, you know, and Carla's been the same talking about Greg's work, you know, and how that's been hugely affected, and that's one of the most common things. And I even saw a Facebook post this morning that almost just made me fall on the ground, where a guy was tweeting at like one particular artist he was using in the AI generation, and he was like, I can remember the artist's name, but it was like, this guy's job's over once I get better at AI. And I was like,
Simon Stalenhag, that's who he was.
Yeah, you've obviously seen it, but like, I was just like, oh my God, like the gall to just like call somebody out like that on their own work. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, it's a whole,
it's extremely worrying to do that to people. It's like you said, if it was consent based, that changes everything, right? Like if Craig Mullins wants to get paid, you know, $100,000 by the company for 600 of his images to train the AI on,
right?
He consents, he gets rewarded. I'll go type into the AI, you know, bunny rabbit in the style of Craig Mullins. Like, there's no, it's that to me is like, that's totally above board, right? And even better if it has clear opt-out options, so that when Craig finds that a director's like, you know what, I don't really need you anymore now with the AI, he can tell them like, yeah, take it out. We're done here. Like, no more of that. Like, and maybe he needs to pay back some amount of his royalty, whatever. But I think that all of that sounds extremely sane to me. That all makes sense, and it's all legally above board. And like I said, if we rewind the clocks to a time before, when it was sort of matter of fact that these things existed and they were decent, I think everybody would have wanted that. I think everybody would have clearly chosen that. So I have to emphasize, like, I think there's definitely a way to do a totally useful, ethical AI system, right? That is based on consent. All of the other boring arguments around it, like, is it art and things like that? Like, I personally think it is art. Like, I think it goes without saying that human beings can express themselves with anything, right?
Yeah.
Like, human, you could go pull bottle caps out of the trash and make
Mhm.
art with it. Like,
Yeah.
the any arguments based on people saying like, oh, you just don't think it's art and you want to gatekeep it. It's like, it's art. It's just, that's not super relevant to the
Yeah.
conversation. What's relevant
Yep.
to the conversation is the systems and the
Yeah.
people that are putting it out and how they're doing it. There's also, just because you brought up the music industry, this is a recent example. And I think it's, I think a lot of these examples, it's like time is going to wash these things away because things are changing so quickly. But
Yep.
one of the main image AIs that people are using is Stable Diffusion by Stability AI, right?
Mhm.
And it has all of the problems that we've indicated. It's trained on the Lion 5B data set, which is 5 billion data crawled images. Let's table that for a second. But it is made by this company, Stability AI, which has they're making a multitude of AI offerings. And one that they have coming out is a music tool. It's called Harmon AI, right? And
Okay.
they are engaging in an egregious double standard. If you go read the info that has come out about Harmon AI, they are happy to say, the same company, right? They have these little subgroups that are making these things, but that same umbrella corporation, for Harmon AI, they bill as a pro. It is made with all copyright free and Creative Commons music and music that artists opted in to offer
Right.
to the AI. And then they say themselves, because AI models are prone to memorization and overfitting, it was a must to keep copyrighted data out of the training set.
Oft.
That is a double standard so direct and so, like, they're laughably putting their foot in their own mouths with that it really, honestly, I don't know how else to interpret that other than they're bad faith actors. Because to me, that reads as if maybe there's some sort of internal civil war or something like that, but that basically indicates that they know they did wrong. And it's just that they're more afraid of musicians than they are of artists. And they
That
see,
right there.
yeah,
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
it's a
Yeah.
more litigious industry, a more unified industry with better
You're dealing with
representation.
millionaires. If Nicki Minaj or Taylor Swift gets pissed off that you're sampling their songs, they can sue you for millions. We can't do that. We don't
Exactly.
have that power.
So,
Artists in the industry some of them make decent money at big studios, but like you're not talking on the same level as like
not
Taylor
at all.
Swift and stuff. Yeah.
Not at all. And I think
Yeah.
that they are aware of that, and they know that the scale of the problem, let's say it's theft. I don't know, let's call it theft. But if
Yeah.
the scale of the theft almost numbs the mind. It's like,
Yeah.
it'd be easier to get behind they stole Craig Mullin's art. It's easier to get behind that than they stole 5 billion pieces of art. That the
Yeah.
scale of that numbs the mind. You're just like, I don't know what to
So
do.
everybody's art.
Yeah. It's like it. I think they understand that we are not, art visual artists are not inclined to unionize, to litigate, to
Right.
be contentious. Artists just want to stick their head in the sand and hide in a hole, and that if they do it on a big enough scale, no one's going to know where to strike. Right. So,
Right.
that's my interpretation of that egregious double standard. There's other ones, like I said, you could say there's a civil war, and that within their company, these people are, more on my side, and the other people are more. I don't know what to call the position that they took, but whatever it is, there is a deep inconsistency going on there, and
Yeah.
it's not a good look for us that we would let them sort of walk all over us on those particular points. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think we're going to have to watch play out. But I know from some of the books I've read, there's one I've just read recently called The Fourth Turning, where it talks about how humankind revolves round and round in these 80 to 100 year cycles where the same thing's going to happen over and over again. And the fourth turning, the one we're in just now, is what they call the crisis part of it, where everything in the world is upheaved. Global crisis with finances, wars, things going on globally. And that is supposed to culminate in around 2028, 2029, because the fourth turn started in 2008 with the financial crisis, so the global financial crisis. And they last about 20 years. So they reckon by 2028, 29, 30, the world will go back to what they call the first turning, which is the age of prosperity, where there's money for everybody, there's jobs, there's loads of things going on that people... Yeah, so it's I mean... And the thing they talked about as well is with the next turning is that AI would play an integral part. It would almost decimate something like 30% of the global job market, where most jobs would be taken up by AI. And that could be, we might see an evolution in the driving mechanic where long-haul drivers, taxi drivers and stuff like that are replaced with self-driving cars. And then within our entertainment industry, some aspects of the art would be handled with AI. And it's hard to determine and predict what that would be, what parts of it would be taken over. But then looking at the last 2 years, concept design and blue sky stuff is definitely, I think, on that list. And I think the more niche you can go with your career and also the more slightly technical, then you can safeguard some of that. Like we were talking about earlier with your brother and user interface, like that seems like one of those jobs that would still be needed, would still be around, would still be one of the things that people are really looking for, because everything needs UI, not just, the games, TV, movies, everything. So yeah, there's definitely a way to kind of safeguard that, but it's difficult because I know why people also are scared in the fact that they've spent 10, 15 years getting good at what they do, and now to think that they have to now again shift, it's unnerving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that particular point, let me just muse on that a bit, that turning, right? Of like, oh,
Yeah.
you did this for 10, 15 years and
Mm-hmm.
it sucks to have to shift, because the usual reaction to that, and it's weird to say usual about an argument that's only a few months old at this point, but having engaged in these arguments to the annoyance of just about everybody that I've met, there is the common rejoinder of like, well, just that's what it is to be in these industries. Like, just adapt, right? Like, just get with it. And that often comes bundled with a lot of the other, for me personally, boring arguments of like, it's just another tool. It's like, I must vehemently disagree. It is not another tool, but I can come back to that. But the sort of punkish like reaction that people have of just like, well, yeah, you learned it for 15 years, but, sucks to be you. Like, bad luck of the draw on the really, it's not like you didn't get thoughtful about it. And it's not like anyone becomes an artist easily. It's incredibly hard to become an artist. So it's like, if you were going to be thoughtful about what you chose to do, art is one of the things that demands the most thoughtfulness from you. And almost day to day being like, is there still a good goddamn reason to do this? Like, to sit down and do it again. So I actually really don't like the usual punkish reaction to that is going on. It doesn't, just because that has been the course of history, that, oh, well, that's the random turning of technology, so too bad for you. That is no consolation on the loss of human capital and human opportunity. And I think it's a little cold and honestly comes off as like petulantly childish in the face of, this is specifically to give the fruits of that sector to a senseless machine. There's no joy will be gained by the AI doing more creative work. No, the AI cannot enjoy the fruits of its labors, right? So we are letting the random turning of technology displace and steal a huge amount of the available moment to moment happiness and satisfaction and meaning that is available from look, art making jobs have their problems, but
Mm.
people do them for a reason. They go for them
Mm.
because they think they'll be fun, and they often are fun to some degree once you get into them.
Yeah.
To give that to a robot
Mhm.
just because it's possible is, by my liking, deeply anti-humanist. It's like, to what
Yeah.
end? Why do we want to do that? Who is
Yeah.
this for? Why are we building this system? It makes very,
Mhm.
very little sense to me. And again, mind you, that's coming from someone who, I don't do that anymore, right? Like, it's
Mhm.
not,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not me losing their job over that. It
Mhm.
seems completely nonsensical.
Yeah.
And I don't, yeah, I'm really not jiving with the arguments that are like, well, the American auto worker, the same thing happened to them, like tough bricks. It's like, you're just gonna brush off, like, I mean, towns were decimated by that
Mhm.
automation. We are still feeling the effects on our economy of the fact
Well,
that most
Detroit as well.
factories
Yeah.
went out.
Like, yeah.
It had huge detrimental
Mhm.
effects that we are still working out. It changed our politics, it changed our overall energy, the way that we
Mhm.
perceive our country.
Mhm.
It is not a small, dismissive thing
Mhm.
to ignore that those were islands of order in a sea
Mhm.
of chaos that we just wholesale clicked off, right? And then
Yeah.
those families triggered the opioid crises, and they couldn't afford. It produces all of these other
Yeah.
problems, right?
It's like the chaos theory where like the butterfly flaps its wings in Tokyo and then in New York there's a rainstorm. Like it's the thing where there's this overlapping effect that happens, cascades the domino effect that when one plant, we had it here in Scotland in a place called Motherwell where my dad was born. When they closed the steel factory there, like, yeah, everybody lost their jobs. The town went to shit. Everybody went on benefits and government aid. Like, yeah, like
Yeah.
it's felt worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, I also can look at history and see that stuff has happened, but
Mhm.
it is completely callous to ignore the suffering that
Mhm.
our family members have gone through. And it's like,
Yeah.
those were people. And again, it's like, maybe that's what happens in history, but it
Mhm.
seems just, but why, man? Why not
Yeah.
choose the people?
Because money, because profits, because corporations. If anything over the last 20 years, and we've seen the way capitalism's ruled your country, especially like in ours. I mean, the UK is definitely part of it, but yeah, like people will always put profits over people every single time, and it's almost like archaic in the way of thinking. But if you go back to look at like how our evolution has went through history and civilizations, is that a couple of hundred years ago, people like you and I would have been relatively poor, living in squabbles, where people who were rich lords, majesties, royalty, would have everything, almost an overabundance. And you look at the world now, where people, especially the energy crisis we're having in the UK, people are really struggling to pay their bills. They're really struggling to feed their kids. Where we now have, because of COVID, we have 25 new billionaires in the country. And like, that distribution of wealth is seen globally now, especially in the US, like where you guys have like Bezos, who's out, taking rockets to space. Well, a lot of his
Yeah.
factory workers, 1,500 of them died in that facility because they couldn't go home during the hurricane. You know what I mean? Like, not to get political or like really deep into like the world, but you're talking about, why would people pick that? And I'm like, I can see why people would pick it and why a company, especially, like if you can hire one AI machine versus 15 concept artists,
Yeah.
it's going to win every time. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So, yeah.
Indeed. The trick is that, just like, the banality of knowing that's what happens, I
Hmm.
don't think justifies just accepting it outright every
Of
time
course.
it
Yeah.
happens, because we all know we're being ill served by that
Yeah.
system. So it seems a bad idea to just accept it. And
Mm.
even the way you put it, it's like, yes, they're going to choose money every time, but the
Mhm.
they is companies.
Yeah.
Is these things that don't actually exist. In the US, we've tried our best to make them people. There's laws that say companies are people, but
Yeah.
in reality, they don't
Mhm.
exist. They're not
Yeah.
real things, right? There's someone
Mhm.
who the CEO and the stockholders
Mhm.
who will benefit from what it does. It's
Yeah.
never the people
Mhm.
choosing to lose their jobs and to have nothing to do and just to be hurled into the chaos of not
Of course.
having any structure in their lives and things like
Mhm.
that. So I just, oh God, it's not something to just accept lightly. I don't
No,
think,
no, not at all.
especially like I said, when it is coming on the back of a ill-conceived and weird system that
Yeah,
we don't understand and that is doing some pretty fucked up things
yeah.
to trigger this. Um, God, it's so deep. And if I could just go back to the it's another tool argument,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Because this one for me in our industry, because we're these
Mm,
kinds of nerds, right?
mhm.
Especially if you're in the digital art world,
Yep.
um, it's the most low hanging fruit argument. So I just want to
Mhm.
quickly look at it.
Yeah,
I'm not a Luddite, right? Like I happen to be known for my traditional art online now, right? That's what
yeah,
my pencil drawings are, most of what's on my YouTube and why people come to me. But
yep.
I have a digital art commercial career. And just to again explain I started making digital art in MS Paint when I was like 6 or 7. I did my
Yeah.
first 3D renders at 10 in Bryce
Mhm.
3D.
Oh, wow.
I've been using Photoshop since I was 13. I did
Mhm.
my first Maya animations of an ATST falling from a cargo ship when I was 14 or 15. I've
Right.
always used new cameras, the new editing softwares. Um, I sculpt in VR. I stream
Yeah,
art on YouTube, for God's sake. I'm
yeah,
surrounded by 3 monitors, one of which I can draw on. I record my pencil drawings on a $3,000 camera.
yeah.
I If you think
Mhm.
I resist tools, you're
Mhm.
nuts. Because and just to keep going, even after I left after I started moving away from the industries, I
Mhm.
learned Blender for fun. I learned how to sculpt in 3D
Mhm.
in VR for
Mhm.
fun.
Mhm.
I love tools. I've been
Yeah.
using them my whole life and never begrudgingly. Every
Mhm.
time that I've learned them, I learn them happily. There's some of my favorite times in art
Yeah.
making. The month-long heat of like learning a new program and you're
Yeah.
figuring out what it does and things like that.
Mhm.
I love that stuff. And I only
Yeah.
want more of those
Mhm.
things, right?
Yeah.
To make an analogy again to the auto workers,
Mhm.
when the auto workers were on the assembly line,
Mhm.
throughout the history of their production, there would have been many new tools introduced, right? So
Mhm.
one day someone would have come in and said, "We use this wrench now." And they would have been like,
Mhm.
"Ah, this goddamn wrench. It's not the wrench I like using." And they were wrong.
Mhm.
They should have just used that wrench. And then
Yeah.
someone came in and said, "Well, now we use this kind of powered riveting gun," right? And they're like,
Yeah.
"Well, I don't like riveting like that, but god damn it, I'll use the riveting gun," right?
Mhm.
And at each one of those turns, they would
Mhm.
have indeed been wrong to resist. It was a tool, right? And there would
Yeah.
have been small changes to the incentive structure. Maybe they had to work longer hours.
Mhm.
Maybe it slightly improved productivity such that maybe they would hire a few less people per year. But
Yeah.
one day,
Mhm.
the gate of the factory rolled open and they rolled in a KUKA arm. And on
Mm.
that day, the people who said we shouldn't use the KUKA arm
Mhm.
for the auto workers would have been right. That was
Mhm.
the one. The KUKA
Mhm.
arm, if for the people who don't know the industry lingo, the KUKA arm is
Mhm.
the biggest brand of robot arm that does automation on lines and
Yeah.
things like that.
Mhm.
With that particular one, that was the one. That was the
Yeah.
killer. That was the one where it wasn't a tool, it was a
Mhm.
replacement. There was
Mhm.
a significant difference there.
Yeah, yeah.
And the threat with these AIs, I think,
Mhm.
is that as someone who has used tools their whole life, I don't think it's a tool. It's a
Right.
replacement. And okay, now let me get some caveats there, right?
Mhm.
People say, no, it is a tool because I'm sitting in front of it right now doing prompts and turning dials, right?
Right.
I think that to think that that's what it's going to be forever is a
Mhm.
failure of imagination because most people
Mhm.
didn't know these things existed 8 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So I would argue the prompting is going to stop. That's my big
Yeah.
argument. I I see, or it's clear to me that you look at something like Midjourney, right? Which
Right.
makes all prompts publicly permanently available. It's a huge data set of not just the images everybody's making, but also the words that they used. Guess what? When you're prompting, you're training the next part of the AI. The AI is learning what people want, what they're asking for. And unfortunately, what's happening with these things right now is that the most tasteful people in the world are telling the robot 100 times a day, here's what I want to see, here's what I want to see, here's what I want to see. Now, this is, I have to admit, in the spirit of honest debate, I have to admit here that this is fortune telling, but I don't think it's much of a jump to see that once they have enough data, they don't need you. Just run it on autopilot. The AIs are just as good at generating strings of text as they are at generating images. They can run it on autopilot. It prompts itself. And honestly, the speed at which you type is just a limiting factor for a company whose real product here is that they can produce an infinitude of images with very little overhead, right? So I think you mentioned earlier the idea of getting a job as an AI like artist, right? Which I'm thinking of that as like the dream of getting a job as an AI soothsayer. You're like the guy trying to pull the cobra out of the basket using your flute. It's like, I don't think that's going to be around long. You know, I don't see it's going to get good enough, fast enough, and be so good at honestly knowing your intentions before you know them, which I really, for other reasons, I think is very possible. That the idea of getting a soothsayer job is pretty, I don't think it's realistic. I don't think that that's coming. And at that point, it will have functioned for a huge amount of jobs. And again, I want to drive a point here. We like making art. It's not like screwing a door to a car, right? Which you can love for the great life that it gives you. The difference with art is that we like making art. Why are we automating one of the few things human beings really like doing, right?
Creativity,
For that thing, at that point, it will have proven itself to not be a tool. It would have been the KUKA arm coming into the factory. It will be a replacement, not a tool. And that's, I think that that's only a matter of time. And if the timelines that this has been occurring on are any indication, it will surprise us. It will surprise us how quickly it happens.
I mean, a lot to unpack there, but
A lot.
I think with Midjourney, what I'm seeing is beta testers. I'm seeing people who are testing a software that eventually people will commercialize and then sell to studios at a profit.
Yeah.
The one thing I noticed in Midjourney the other day is they have this new remaster mode where once you have upscaled or had the variation you want at the picture, it has an option now where you can remaster it. And what it actually does is it makes the painting more like a painting, because the biggest complaint people had was when you looked at AI is that it didn't look like a painting, it just looked like AI generated a mess.
Yeah.
So when you press this button now, it makes it more like a painting because they're like, well, that's something people want. So now they're adding the button because they've had the feedback. So yeah, like another year, 2 years, it might become, Google might sell it as a commercial product to studios and be like, type in anything you want, or they'd have maybe predetermined like sci-fi buildings, whatever. And as you press the button, it gives you the result or many results based on the data set. And I think that's probably closer to where it's going to go, where you'll beta test this tool. The thousands of people in Midjourney Discord just now are beta testing that, and then eventually it'll be whoever comes to the market quickest with that data set.
I think so. I think it's pretty, if you take off your rose-colored glasses about it, there's not a lot of great outcomes to the fact that they are collecting the prompts and what people want and people's preferences by the millions, right? There's not a lot of good outcomes there. Even the idea that people have of like, oh, well, at least someone will always need to pick which is the best option it generates. It's like, bud, every time you prompt stable, it gives you 4 to 12 options, depending what model you're using. And then it's not like they don't know which one you're picking. They show you 12 and then you're telling it hundreds of times a day, that's the best one. That's the best one. That's the best one. It's all training data all the way down, and they are doing the classic big data stuff that we've seen go wrong with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything. They're doing that with the prompts, which is your preference, any changes that you make, you modifying the prompt when it gives you an unsatisfactory result, right? The feedback that people are giving it. I agree. I think it's inevitable that we will look back on this time and we'll be like, that was a very shrewd way to get people to continue to train the model for free. And then once it's up to snuff, I think that they will sell it. I want to point out, now again, any particular company or anything like that, knowing how these things go in history, people won't even know these names in 6 months because 800 other companies will have come up. Another one will be the major one. But to date this conversation and mention Stable Diffusion, which I'm bringing that one up because Stable Diffusion is currently open source, right? So people say, well, they can't take it away from us. It's open source. I just want to point out, one, Stability is a for-profit company. And the CEO of Stability, Ahmad, I forget his last name, but Ahmad was a hedge fund manager for 19 years. And he is going after a $1 billion valuation for Stability. If that sounds like somebody who is inclined to give you your favorite toy for free forever, I don't think you've been on this planet for very long. And I just want to continue to point out that if he's going for $1 billion valuation, that means he's going to bring on investors. That's what that will produce. And investors who give huge amounts of money usually wind up on the board of directors. So even if you're delusional enough to think that Ahmad is doing this for the love of art when he's been a hedge fund manager for 19 years, you think every investor he brings on the board of directors wants to give you your favorite toy for free. And God help you if he does an IPO and becomes a publicly traded company, because then he will have a fiduciary that is legal responsibility to always be increasing shareholder value, which is a little bit of a hard sell when you give your product away for free. And the rejoinder there is that people say, well, I already have it. I downloaded Stable Diffusion version 1.2. It's sitting on my computer and I can run it offline. And it's like, well, if you want to use the old model forever, but people are ignoring that it costs $600,000 to train Stable Diffusion V1 point whatever it's on. So you can have this old version now, but if you want to keep up and you want to keep stealing Simon Stalenhag's style or whatever, you're going to want to update the training set. And unfortunately, the way the models are currently designed, from my understanding, I'm not a machine learning guy, but from my understanding, if you want to update the data set, you need to retrain it again for $600,000. So it may be sitting on your computer, the old version, but to improve it, you can change weights, you can turn dials. But if you want to retrain it on an updated data set, it is restrictive, which will keep you completely linked to the progress and what you yourself claim are benevolent releases from these companies that are for profit. So from my reading of that, again, that environment, that system, you basically have to wish for a fairy tale land where these people want you to have this for free so that you can make your anime or whatever it is. It's just, dog, it's not going to go down that way.
The fucking anime stuff that I've been seeing recently, like the giant tittied fucking women, and oh my God, Twitter's just losing its mind at this moment. But it's like this whole...
The funniest part for me is the people who didn't care before, but as soon as they saw I could do boobies, they're like, now I really care. I'm like, oh my God, these are our warriors in this battle.
Yeah. No, it was one of the things. I think it was Lizette. It was one of the former art directors at Double Fine, and she had posted, "Men, we're going to give you this incredible AI technology that can vastly improve, function and blue sky ideation and stuff like that." And then it's like also men, and it's like the anime titty pictures. It's like it's like the two ends of the scale are crazy, and like the AI itself, it's one of these things you talk about, like for profit. I mean, there was the whole article recently about, I think it was even last year, where the AI engineer, the machine learning engineer who left Google, had talked about the AI that's at Google had become sentient, and how he had reported on that and how that was dangerous. And even Elon Musk, I've seen him in some podcasts, especially with Joe Rogan, where he's talked extensively about his, you know, upset ideas that, AI is going too fast and that it should be slowed down, and that, he's talked to people for a long time about, it really should have regulations and things put in place where people just can't go crazy with it. There's a certain ethical part of it that has to be implemented in a company. And he has talked extensively about it, but people just won't listen to him because they want to be, the first to market with this new crazy toy that can make them billionaires. And
the problem that he pointed out there seems to be that there's a big gap in the middle where most people don't believe they're good. Most people don't understand. Okay, first off, almost nobody has even heard of them, right? Like even with like our world is very insular, we're all nerds, we're up on this stuff. We love technology, things like that. So we're inclined to know. But let's be serious here. On the global scale, most human beings have not caught on that art making AIs or really any kind of AI is really going through anything. So there's those people at one end of the spectrum. There's a gap in the middle where then most people who do know see that they're very good, and then the people who program them and who work on them are extremely incentivized to, like you said, they want to be the first to market. They see how good it is, and because they know it's good, they're like, there's a lot of money to be made here and things like that. So they are inclined to rush headlong into it. And what we're getting here, sorry about that. What we're getting here is it's like they're trying to sneak it in under the wire, right? It's like they want to, at least that's what it seems something like Stable did, right? Putting out this product open source with a huge trawl data set that they didn't ask anyone's permission to use, right? It's like it wasn't on anyone's radar. And they're like, once we put it out there, they can't stop us. And they have every incentive to do that because off of the sheer news, they have $1 billion valuation. So they're trying to get it in under the wire before people in general have realized like, oh my God, they're actually better than you'd think. They're actually quite good at doing these things. That's just not on enough people's radar. So I think that the gap in the middle between the understanding of them, between people who know nothing and the people who get what they do, is what is allowing these ethical sneaks, these shoving it in under the wire and just kind of like, putting it out there without really any oversight. Because like I said, even most artists, they don't know what's going on. They're not aware about what's going on. And they maybe haven't looked at a lot of AI art and seen just how good it can do at a lot of stuff,
Yeah, I mean, we laugh about the big titted anime girls, but like some of the paintings I've seen, as ludicrous as they are done well enough. Like the faces are generally quite done well. They have clothing, the cloth. It looks like I've seen people obviously, because I obviously love that kind of art where people do more anime style stuff, and I've just finished watching Edge Runners on Netflix and loved all that. And the guys who obviously developed that, the studio in Japan. Love that kind of stuff. So I do appreciate those artists who make that other kind of, like even Rake, like the guy you probably know as well, like who makes that kind of stuff. Yeah. So like, he obviously, that's part of his daily thing is he makes stuff like that. So, but then, when you look at the AI stuff, it is like, that is pretty close to what he's doing now. Like, it's not even like, I mean, the hands, sure, they're still a little flay in what they're doing and other bits and pieces, but 90%.
I'm not sure the people who are in the market for big tittied anime girls are really looking at the hands. I think they
no
that slide. I think they'd be willing to let that slide. Yeah.
Fair point. But like, so, but no, but like, you look, I think when I initially looked at this stuff back even a year ago, you were saying to yourself, like, it looks okay, but it's not quite there. It's, the faces weren't right. And but now, that stuff is like, wow, like, how the fuck? Like, it's so close to,
it looks quite,
like somebody could spend 100 hours on a painting like that and maybe not even come that close, and that's the scary thing.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who's very, I've been looking at a lot of art my whole life and teaching art and learning from the best. Like, I don't like most stuff. I think most stuff is bad. I don't know how to put it nicely. Right. It's just like,
it's your taste.
It's just my taste. It's just, I have pretty, I've seen enough where it's like a picture has to be really good for me to think it's good.
as your skill level also evolves, that will change.
Yeah. So as someone in that position, I hate to tell people, but it's like they're pretty goddamn good. They're pretty goddamn good. And whatever the problems are, the real issue is that they're pretty goddamn good in 20 seconds. That's a real problem. That's a real problem.
Like 20 seconds versus 20 hours painting something.
And it's giving you
that
4
level.
in 20 seconds. It's not giving you 1.
It's giving you choices.
It's giving you options in 20 seconds. So
you can maybe paint 4 thumbnails in 20 seconds if you spent 5 seconds per thumbnail, but like you couldn't do it to that level, and it's only gonna get better. It's not gonna get worse. So where we'll be in a year from now is a scary prospect. But I digress. I don't want to talk about AI forever because I think I know. Because it is becoming an all-encompassing part of our industry, and I kind of hate that just now that there's a whole thing going on about it. But just before we wrap up, and I think in the last segment, what we really should talk about is your drawing course, which is just launched. I think a couple of weeks ago, month ago, something like that.
I guess it's been 2 months now. Like going over 2 months. I launched it back in the middle of July. It was like July 15th or something like that.
For someone who's done Meds Maps and has seen your random appearances in the forest dressed up to the random encounters, I thought, which were great. Your advert for launching it, I think, also was brilliant. I think it was a great, I think what I loved about, again, going back to James Douglas, our buddy in NY, when he first got in the scene, he'd done a couple of the things where he had pulled his background of doing cool skits and off comedy stuff, and I'd mixed that with the art stuff, and I thought, I actually thought if he'd continued on that path, he would have had his own almost Jazza style channel, where people would have came for the fun and laughs and art, and not just the art. But now it's obviously he's very art focused. But why was this a thing that you thought you wanted to dive into? I know at one point, like you said, teaching just became a thing, but the whole course, was that almost something even that Ahmed was inspiring at a sense when he was building Meds Map? Was that part of a conversation where you were trying to think of how your own way to do that, or was that something you had way before?
Ahmed was definitely a big inspiration. After he put his out, he specifically told me that I should consider doing one, that I should do one. And I always take Meds advice seriously. We've always sort of we have a relationship where it's like, I'll try something, I'll tell him you should try this, he'll try something, you should try this, and we basically always do it. We always try the thing the other one's doing. But so he was definitely a direct inspiration, but it landed on me. If the environment hadn't already been there, he would have told me to, and I would have been like, nah, I would have been like, oh, maybe. But there had already been some stuff coming up from my teaching experience where I saw it was a good idea. And then that's why when he told me, basically that day, I started working on it.
Right.
So first off, I got into teaching not because I thought it was time or I wanted a separate income stream or something like that. They wound up doing that. But the real reason that I did it was because people started asking me to teach. It was a natural product. So I just started getting with some regularity, like 2 to 3 messages, DMs, a week of people saying, teach me how to draw like you. So once I was getting those with great regularity and they were specific, they were in this kind of way for this kind of thing. I was like, I guess I should probably start teaching, because there's clearly, I didn't need to make a market for it. The market's kind of
demand's already there.
Yeah. So at that point, and this was a while ago, but that's when I started doing my first one-on-one mentorship students. So I would just onboard one person at a time, and I'd do calls with them one-on-one. That was how I began teaching. And then still the demand started increasing and the mentorships were going well. People were really liking them and getting a lot of value out of them. So then I started, when my first college teaching opportunity came up at a art center, I was like, it's a good idea. I know how to do this. I have some experience one-on-one. Let's do it in a classroom. Then once I found that I liked the classroom, I did a digital version of that. I started doing my workshops, which are, they aligned with the pandemic a bit, but over Zoom, we just run it like a regular classroom. And we I was doing that with groups of 10 students at a time.
Mhm.
And I always included the like mental stuff in there. Like my people really come to me, it seems, for like the willingness to tackle not just like, let's do these pieces in your portfolio, let me draw over your
Mhm.
stuff, but then also like, oh, what's hurting your heart? Like what's really driving you crazy and things like that. And
Yeah.
bringing in the mental stuff and being open to that.
Mhm.
So all of that was great for that. But
Mhm.
with the experience I had teaching in all of those ways,
Mhm.
I found that um, it was actually difficult at the level that I wanted to do it to teach
Mhm.
the technical knowledge in that context. I could
Right.
always do diagrams. Um, I could always do talking, explaining through something. But with
Mhm.
when somebody asked me like, show me how to render a sphere, I always had to
Mhm.
be like, it would take 2 hours. Like, are you going to
Right.
watch me do that on this phone call for two
Mhm.
hours? And
Right.
then is that going to be the only thing we do? And then it's gone. Right. So
Yeah. Yeah.
once I realized there was that gap, that put the seed in my head that I was like, I'm actually surprised to find for the technical stuff, I do really believe pre recorded content, edited,
Mhm.
controlled, actually is the best teaching method.
Yeah.
I still think one-on-one or group setting is best for the mental stuff, is best
Mhm.
for goal setting, is best for designing portfolios. But for
Mhm.
the actual nitty-gritty drawing technical knowledge, um, pre-recorded content actually is the way to go.
Mhm.
And I just found that, like I said, because I kept finding it very difficult to get around to it in all of the other
Mhm.
contexts. So
Yeah.
I had that in my head for like a year or two. And I
Yeah.
played around with it in my head, like, how would I do that? Maybe I just put it all on YouTube, but then how do you people lose YouTube videos, like people
Right.
have whole eras of their YouTube that you don't even know are there because you only see the recent stuff, right? So I was like, so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
doesn't seem ideal. But I just kind of brushed it off. And then that's why when Ahmed told me I made a course, you should make it, it's working well, I was like, that's it.
Mhm.
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I made Form from Imagination, which
Mhm.
is specifically designed to help people gain the confidence to draw out of their head with great verisimilitude, like to
Yep.
have form, to have structure, to have
Mhm.
comfort, inventing things that look realistic. We could debate what
Mhm.
realism means, but
Yeah. Yeah.
basically, like if you've seen my art, stuff like that, like winging it,
Yeah.
but still giving it structure and solid rendering and giving it dimensionality,
Yeah.
and being comfortable making things up from your mind.
Yep.
It's it was a lot of fun to make. I basically took at the beginning of this year, I took basically 6 months off. I went into a hole and only worked on the course for six
Right.
months straight. So it was a huge period of doing all the demos, rewatching the recordings of all the demos and writing the scripts for everything that I said,
Right.
recording my voiceovers. It's a lot of work because I think it's near 60 videos across the whole thing.
Wow.
It's a ridiculous amount of hours, and it's like
Mhm.
um it was a ton of work. Then I had to edit everything, do all of the work of uploading it and all that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it was 6 months of only doing that. I basically did
Right.
nothing else. I ran one workshop in February, and then after that
Right.
it was all just working on this thing.
Mhm.
And it's out now. You should check it out. The
Mhm.
Right now it's I really believe in feedback for art
Mhm.
courses. Like
Mhm.
as I've said, my background is from doing one-on-one group settings, college classes. So
Yep. Yep.
to me, feedback is super, super important. So
Yep.
right now, I'm only saying right now because there's just from messages and people talking to me, there's a little interest in an alternative. But the way that I launched and the way it is right now, it's feedback only. Like it's for feedback. So
Right.
you get the course. It's a course you're doing with me, just in an asymmetrical sense. You watch
Right.
the pre recorded content, you do the assignments at your own pace. We have our
Mhm.
community page, you post to the community, and I give
Mhm.
feedback on everything. I mean, as far as I know right now, for the tons of assignments that people have posted, I haven't missed one. I'm doing feedback on
Right.
absolutely everything, diagrams, drawovers, everything like that. But that way people aren't alone. And as I would describe the course as exhaustive, but in this way, it's art. Art is so huge and so broad that even if you tried to cover it as I did, these foundational exercises and moving all the way up to much more complex material, there's still always more to say. So the feedback allows me to cover areas that I didn't quite get to adjust people's personal problems. Like, you're focusing too much on this aspect, relax on this, tighten this. And it's been great. I mean, the community that's built up around it is wonderful. The assignments are humbling as well. Like, I worked my ass off on the demos, but I get such a rush every time someone posts something where I'm like, shit, that's better than my demo. They did an excellent job. Like, that's always really exciting. It's super inspiring. So, yeah, that's the course. If you're interested in something like that, I'd love to have anybody aboard. You could check it out at www.formfromimagination.com. It's got the video, it's got the info on there, and it has the index. You can get a preview of all the sub chapters, it lists all of the videos that are actually in there, so you can see the sweeping scope of everything that gets covered. And yeah, the ads were super fun to do. I'm going to do more. And that, like James, I just have a similar background where me and my friends, I had a lot of friends who were into film back in high school. And I always liked acting and just goofing off and things like that. So I had a lot of fun exposure with that as a kid. And I'm still friends with those people, fortunately. So when it came time to do it, it was just fun for us. I was like, we haven't had a reason to do something like that in a long time. Let's do it. And we already have the grooves for that. You know, we know how to write the script. We know what stuff we're going to need. We know
how to shoot stuff, how to light it.
Yeah. So that ad, for anyone who's interested in any stuff like this, my wife and I sort of came up with the idea and wrote the loose script one afternoon for like 2 hours. And then we were like, we're filming that tomorrow. And in one day, we filmed everything start to finish. In my experience, it takes about a whole day to do a minute of decent content. It's a little more than a minute. So we did a great job there, I'd say. And then I edited it in like 8 hours the next day. So it was like a tight 2 days of putting it together. It was tons of fun. It was a real blast.
The thing as well, I think I found with people who live in New York, I don't know if it's maybe even just like, there's a culture also in LA, but that's because there's so many actors out there. But in New York, so many people I know also moonlight as stand-up comedians. Like, there's a whole stand-up culture in New York that people, you know, just try it. At least once in their life I've tried stand-up, or I've tried getting in front of an open mic. And I mean, I couldn't do it. I'm fucking terrified. But like, yeah, I mean, it's one of these things that I think if you can bring that, also it attracts more people to your cause, because it's like art, in a sense, going through even university, can be dull in a sense that, like, know that art isn't exciting, but how people can teach it. Because I feel like as many good artists as there are in the world, not every good artist is a good teacher. So it's great to find somebody who feels like they're young in a sense, that they're young at heart, like they're doing fun things, like you said, like even the random incursions that Med's put in his map is like, it's fun. It's something that breaks up the monotony of, you know, maybe just drawing forever for 5-6 hours a day. You have a fun video, like, oh, this is fun, you know, and keep going. When you kind of gamify almost, like working out and leveling up, and I know Antonio in ArtWad has done a similar thing now. When you submit your WADs for the week or the things you've done, you have now a leveling system where you can level up to different levels of goblin, you know, and depending how much you put in, which is fun. Like, it's something that keeps people engaged and makes more people want it. And, you know, whatever you're charging for your course, I mean, what are you how much is your course right now at the moment?
It's 640. Like, like I said,
which is great. No, because look, I was just going to say, because like with CGMA, with a lot of those big schools, like you will pay, you know, you went to Art Center, right? You know what I'm talking about. You know, like the money Art Center takes, and it's a great education. You know, the teachers are great, and the institute, and the placement in the studios. But like no one as well. Like, it's just that some of them were like, it was like $15,000 a term for some places. Like, it's crazy money.
Yeah,
it's
no,
absolutely crazy money.
It's huge. Yeah, I've seen some people online say like, "Woo, that's steep," and I'm like I mentioned before, I'm like, I think people don't get that it's feedback only. Like, it's a feedback course. I give,
you're getting my personal time.
I give feedback on everything, and actually, I don't know why people are confused, because if you look at the feedback versions of classes on Schoolism or something like that, I'm actually at the bottom of the market for a feedback class. Like, a feedback class on Schoolism is $1,000, not $640,
if not more. You know, depending on the class and who's teaching it. You know, it's like
so I think people just maybe haven't noticed that or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's because it's a feedback course. That's the market for getting feedback for, and it's
100%.
not to mention it's I think the total number of assignments in the course that I asked for is 30. So it's like it's a shit ton of feedback to have to give. Yeah.
It's a lot. You know, I mean, this is the thing. We had this argument with in Antonio's, this again with Artworld, because it's similar again to what you're doing, but like he has now upped all his prices and has different tiers now for memberships. But he was initially in Artworld 1.0, he was charging €15 a month for his course, which is
that's
crazy.
Yeah, that's
like insane.
If you're doing any feedback, that's just, but that might as well
Yeah.
be poverty wage. I mean, that's not
it's not even minimum wage.
Yeah.
And people were complaining about €15 a month, and I was like, how?
Well, it's easy to complain on the internet. That's why.
No, of course, no, I understand. Yeah, but like, yeah, it wasn't one-to-one feedback. It was more just like people who also helped him slightly could give like slight, just like this looks good, this doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Now he has a tier like if you want his time, yeah, like I think it's closer to €100 a month. But then even then, it's like it's still cheap in regards to, you know, because even when you up that, people are like, oh, €100 a month. I'm like, yeah, but you're getting one-on-one feedback from industry professionals.
Yeah.
Like
that's always going to be steep. Like I said, because people have, you know, I've gotten messages from people, you know, basically asking for some other option. So I'm considering releasing a non-feedback version that people can get if they're like, well, again, I think feedback is so important. So I'm actually a little loath to release a non-feedback version because I think it's so important to actually getting better. But if people really want it, it's like I'm thinking about putting a version out there for the people who seem to, you know, they're just like, they really want the material, but they're really not super interested in getting the feedback. But yeah, anything where you're going to have the instructor, whether it's asymmetrical or not, right? Whether it's real time or they do it on their own time, anything where an instructor has to sit and review your work and fix it, it's like, it's going to be a lot. There's no way around it. I mean, you need to, it's just, it takes so much time. There's single assignments in the course where regularly when people post it, because of the nature of the assignment, each feedback I give on it takes me 2 to 3 hours because I have to draw over the thing completely. And it's not a rote exercise for any of the assignments where I have to, and there's several of these, I ask the students, do something creative. Don't do one that looks like what other people are posting. Do a different thing.
Right.
When I ask that screws up the feedback pipeline because I'm doing that because I think it's essential, right? But then I don't get to do the same notes on every piece of feedback, which really smooths it out. Everybody does a different thing. So I have to do completely novel notes and drawovers on everybody's stuff. It takes a long time. So yeah, it's going to be expensive.
It's the eternal struggle of artists trying to justify their time and money. I think it's something we'll probably never escape, but yeah, God damn it. But yeah, so I mean, for those guys who are listening at this point, and I definitely will even just put them in the show description notes so people can see it just off the bat, but I'll include all of Stephen's links down below, all his socials, and of course the course and every part of that. If you guys are interested, you can check it down below, click on the links, and just check out Stephen's work. He's one of the, I think, the Da Vinci's of our time. I think, given the complexity and level of his illustration skills, I think, man, your stuff is, you know, and like I said, you've been one of the most requested people we've had in the last 6 months because
I was surprised to hear that. That's interesting. I
mean, people always get this thing where they're like, it's an artist thing, right? Because you're so self-deprecating. You're like, people like what I do. They like my work. Yeah, you really like me. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of these things where you get caught up in thinking, why could, but you're good at what you do, man. You know, you've got a history. And you're now at this era where I've seen, like with Ahmed, people who have spent, you know, the 10 plus years building their career and are now in this void where there's a whole new generation of concept artists trying to come out of the world and find, you know, their way into the industry, and they're looking for teachers, they're looking for guides. You're one of them. So I mean, it's also, you're one of the very few people I think who's put out a course to this extent. You know, Ahmed, when he done his map, you know, everybody was floored at the time because it was, you know, I think he almost done it in spite of Art Center because, you know, he has this whole thing where, you know, he hates, you know, the brick and mortar establishment and hates it. But then, yeah, like you're one of maybe like, I don't know, 5 people I know in the whole industry that's done it.
Med was a huge inspiration. I mean, until it occurs to you that you could really do one at that scale, unless someone has trailblazed it, like maybe someone like Med did,
Yeah.
it kind of seems like a crazy idea or a bad idea
Of
or something
course.
like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a huge amount of work to try to
Mhm.
actually, again, because art is so broad, even on a
Mhm.
narrow skill set, it's a huge
Mhm.
amount of work to try to go from the beginning to the end of it,
Yeah.
especially,
Yeah.
doing it yourself and sort of self-motivating
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
But I've got to say, like, as a teacher, it's so
Mhm.
beneficial for me to be able to just say, it's all here, right? Like
Yeah.
for that particular question, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's easy to
Go here.
ask, like, how do you draw from
Yeah.
imagination well, right? Like,
Mm.
it's easy to ask that. The
Mhm.
answer is like 30 hours long and involves a huge amount of work and it
Yeah.
turns
Yeah.
out. So it's just so much easier. It's so good to just have regurgitated it carefully,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
craftily
Yeah.
and lovingly, to have put it down
Mhm.
cohesively one time and then just have it and be like, that's my answer to that big
Yeah.
question.
Basically. Yeah, I'd done the same. I used to have people used to, even when I started the podcast, because I wasn't a professional, but because I spoke to so many people would be like, can you give me advice? And I used to have a just copy and paste. Here's the artists I look at. Here's the books to buy. Yeah, and I just used to paste it to people and say, here's my answer. Because like you say, you could get so caught up in just regurgitating that constantly. But then it's funny how you'll think of the course as well, because if you put it down to time, you say you spent 6 months doing that, not even including maybe the shoot for the video, that's like $100 a month for working on that. Because people, you're saying 600 for the course, but then like if you put that into 6 months, I mean, for 6 months worth of work, you couldn't live off $100 a month in New
Oh
York. Like
yeah, no,
fucking
yeah. Just to be,
yeah.
the thing about justifying how much you're
Mhm.
charging for anything, I
Mhm.
don't believe in it. I was happy to just
Yeah, of
put it out. I picked my price and I was like,
course.
I don't fucking care. Like I know
Yeah,
what I need, right? Like,
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I personally feel no need to justify,
Mhm.
but just because this is an industry thing and
Mhm.
people may engage these things in the future, right? They may
Yeah.
make a course and things like that. I do think it's interesting to talk about the behind the scenes stuff just so that
Mhm.
people can learn about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, one of the most difficult challenges for
Mhm.
doing something like this is
Mhm.
making the space in your life to do it.
Yeah,
It's like it's
yeah,
not an easy thing. That it's like
yeah.
it's hard enough to draw it, to record it, to write it,
Mhm.
to edit it, to do the
Mhm.
curriculum, right? But
Mhm.
what most people wouldn't think of is you need to have done enough work before it where you're financially solvent to not work for 6 months, which not
Yeah.
most people are not. I've had to work hard to have enough
Yep.
savings to do that, and then that
Yep.
doesn't even consider the emotional difficulty of telling like your wife and your parents like I'm going to not work for 6 months on a business venture. Like you have to have very good relationships where people are going to look at you and be like,
Mhm.
okay, I trust you. I
Yeah.
think you could do it.
Yeah.
Like it's not. There's so many things
Yeah.
going on in there, and there's a lot of risks. So
Yeah.
for anyone who's thinking of doing all of those things, like
Mhm.
um, it's like sometimes you just need to, if you're gonna take the leap of faith and you're
Yep.
going to risk so much,
Mhm.
you should totally be okay just valuing yourself at what you value yourself at.
Yeah.
And remember, like it's just, like I said, like who cares what people say on the internet? Like to a
Yeah,
person,
yeah, yeah.
everyone who critiques anything like that, especially prices, they're always anonymous because
Yep.
they know deep down they're like, well, I might still buy it, and when I'm in there, I don't want them to recognize my name for critiquing the price. Like it's just the internet. That's how stuff works.
Yeah,
It's not a
yeah,
big,
yeah.
you know,
No, 100%.
it's
Yeah.
just not a big deal.
No, and I definitely feel like it's justified. And like I say, is even you compare it to your competition, like guys at CGMA Art Center, like the prices are 2-3 times that, and it's I think it's because I'm also an artist myself, or a creative, in general, and I know for many years when I've done stuff for free, and people would belittle people like, yeah, you're doing what you love, you don't have to get paid for it. I'm like, yeah, but I want to live, I need to eat,
Yeah.
Pay rent and put the lights on, like anybody else, I have to live. So
Some
yeah,
artists don't need to make money off of it. Let's admit it. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
in art who come from secure backgrounds where they're doing
Yeah.
it because they didn't need to do something else. So they had the
Yeah.
ability to pursue this thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, some of us, I myself included, like I don't come from that background. Like I have nothing's coming to me. Like
like a safety net. Yeah.
like my
Yeah.
mom and dad don't really. There's nothing there. I don't know how else. I don't know how to put it nicely. So
Generational wealth and everything. Yeah.
I had to, if this was going to work, I had to make it work financially, and I don't.
Yeah.
It's just like there's no other. I don't have. This is my skill set, you know. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I need it to be financially solvent. There's nothing weird
Yeah, of course.
about that, you know.
Makes
That's life.
100% sense.
life.
Yeah, preaching to the choir, man. Preaching to
man.
the choir. Yeah. So anyway, so a great place to end it. And like I say, is for people who are listening, we'll have all of Stephen's links down below. Make sure you check out his course and all his ArtStation website, everything in between. And yeah, just thanks, Stephen, for coming on and
Thank you,
talking. I hope you found it somewhat interesting or somewhat engaging.
I love talking shop. I love talking about all this stuff, even the stuff I'm thinking about. It's still fun to talk about.
No, 100%. When I used to work as an engineer, I used to hate talking about work outside of work. But now I'm in one of these industries where, you know, I'm like a nerd like you, like technology, games, movies. When things come out that change, when trailers get released, when companies do new exciting things, I'm always excited to talk about it. And I think it's a great way for people to show their love, because we're all fans at the end of the day. You know, like we do this job, but we all came at it because we love games growing up or movies, whatever. So it's great that we can talk about it with other people. Again, thanks you guys for listening. Again, links down below. Thanks to Stephen for coming on, and we'll see you in the next episode. I hope you guys are all staying safe in the world and again creative, and we'll see you later.
Take care,
bye
everybody.
guys.
Thanks so much for having me.